Meantime, another bloody holiday weekend in Chicago. 54 people shot, 7 killed through Labor Day weekend, but officials in Illinois still resisting any help from the White House to get crime under control.
No federal troops in the city of Chicago. No militarized force in the city of Chicago. We're going to defend our democracy in the city of Chicago. We're going to protect the humanity of every single person in the city of Chicago.
Brewer Group CEO and former NFL player Jack Brewer joins us now to react. Jack, good morning to you. There's obviously a political urge from Democrats to go against anything Donald Trump does. But Mayor Johnson right there is saying he wants to protect the humanity, the human life of every single person in Chicago, while refusing the very help from Donald Trump that could get him to do that, all while 54 people were shot in Chicago over the weekend, which is a routine number for the city. So do you think he is aware of that twisted irony between his message, what he's saying, and the actions that he could take with President Trump to prevent these crimes?
Of course he does. I mean, he is a master manipulator. Can you imagine being able to have that message in front of a crowd of people? I mean, who are the people yelling? It's like he's a cult leader. It's unbelievable to see what we're seeing in the streets of Chicago continue, particularly for Brandon Johnson, someone who's from there. He's seen it. He's seen the bloodshed in the streets. You look at the names and you see the ages of the victims. I mean, there's dozens of kids that got shot over the weekend. I mean, you would have, a memorial service right now going out in most communities if you have that type of people getting shot. I mean, this is more numbers than you saw in the Iraqi war. And so it's just ridiculous. I think there has to be something done. The citizens of Chicago, when you hear from them, they're urging for President Trump to come in there and clean up this city. The bloodshed must end. Yeah,
you can't protect humanity if the humans are dead. I mean, that's implicit in what he said. It makes no sense what he said at the end of the day.
No sense at all.
Let's go over some stats. Chicago has seen a significant increase in felonies, misdemeanors, and motor vehicle theft since 2021. I mean, those are huge jumps in most instances. What are Pritzker and Johnson going to say when the guard ultimately does move in and those numbers inevitably go down? Because, Jack, we know they will when the guard's there.
No question, they're going to do the same thing that you see the mayor of D.C. do, and you start to see those politicians, those Democratic politicians, they're going to have to listen to the people because it's going to affect the way they fundraise. And that's an unfortunate situation. The reality of their schools producing kids that can't read and write is crime. The realities of fatherlessness in streets of Chicago. Who do you think those kids? Those kids don't have dads in the house who are coming home, disciplining their kids. Those kids are fatherless youth running the streets of Chicago, and either they're going to end up in prison or in the graveyard. And so they better get the jail cells prepared to put a bunch of people in the streets of Chicago, because that's what's coming next. And J.D. Pritzker, I got a message for you, sir. You need to get yourself right. You need to get yourself in the Lord, because what you're doing is ungodly. Massacres happening, and families are being broken up and devastated because of the things that you say and the laws that you're making. And so, President Trump, go fix it for us. That's why we elected you, and let's bring some peace to those poor black families across Chicago.
Yeah, and President Trump is reportedly weighing whether or not to send the National Guard in. It won't be as easy in Washington, D.C., where he does have jurisdiction and can do that, as in Chicago. But one thing that Mayor Johnson and Governor J.B. Pritzker could do is work with President Trump. And then, I mean, the human element is the first and foremost part of this story, but from a political standpoint, they could work with the president and then take total credit while saving lives in the process. So that's another thing that they could do.
Said it could happen by Friday, so we will be watching.
That would be common sense, right? That would be common sense.
Exactly.
You would think, yeah. I mean, how can you lay your head down at night knowing that many people have a bullet wound in them?
Great point.
It's unbelievable.
All right, so Jack, we also want to ask you about what's coming up this week, which is NFL season kicking off on Thursday. Dallas Cowboys facing the defending Super Bowl champions Philadelphia Eagles, which is a team you played on. So what are your predictions, expectations, thoughts about this upcoming season?
First off, I will be watching this game because neither team will have men with pom-poms in their hand. So I can't wait to watch that. I think Philadelphia Eagles win this game. You know, Dallas Cowboys have been struggling, had a terrible season last year, disappointing season. I think they'll have some troubles this year as well. I look forward to big things from the Eagles. Hopefully they can get back to the Super Bowl. But I must say, I'm looking forward to also seeing my Giants come out in this week opener.
Jack, I'm very disappointed in you. Hopefully the Eagles can get back to the Super Bowl while you have a Giants helmet behind you. I don't know if I can have Jack Brewer back on this program.
Hey, no,
Jack.
you're always welcome.
Todd, I'm being realistic, man. I want the Giants to just make the playoffs, man.
I
make
want the Giants
playoffs
to go 7-10. If the Giants go 7-10, that is a winning year in my estimation. Jack Brewer, always great to have you, my friend.
Good to see you.
We'll have you back.
God bless
Absolutely.
you.
We certainly will.
So at least 56 people were shot in Chicago over Labor Day weekend, with 8 victims dying. The president calling out Democrat lawmakers trying to, quote, justify violent crime instead of working with the administration to eliminate it. Meanwhile, Chicago's mayor and Illinois governor continue to stand against any plans of sending in the National Guard. Watch.
No federal troops in the city of Chicago. No militarized force in the city of Chicago. We're going to defend our democracy in the city of Chicago. We're going to protect the humanity of every single person in the city of Chicago.
We hope that they don't send any troops along with ICE. And if they do, they'll be in court pretty quickly because that is illegal.
Let's bring in Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett. So, Greg, the Democrats are making this a process issue, but they're not really focusing on the victims. So in yesterday's show, we got the shooting numbers, and it went up. And also the deaths went up by 1 as well. And then if you look over last Labor Day weekend, it almost doubled. So there's clearly an epidemic going on in Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, I think the mayor and the governor are siding with lawlessness and disorder simply because the president's in favor of law and order. And by law, you know, the president does have the power to federalize the National Guard, send them into cities like Chicago to suppress civil disorder, enforce federal laws, even if Governor Pritzker resists. Johnson is irrelevant in such matters. And the president can also deploy other armed forces because the Constitution gives the commander-in-chief inherent powers, Article 2, to ensure that all laws are faithfully executed. Beyond that, though, the Insurrection Act, passed by Congress, specifically allows the president to use the military to address law enforcement emergencies, halt domestic violence, particularly where governors and mayors refuse to do it. Trump did it in Los Angeles. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, a liberal-leaning court, upheld his decision as completely lawful. And, of course, it quelled the violence. So, you know, that doesn't mean Pritzker isn't going to sprint to the nearest court to get an injunction. He'll do it. But the law is squarely on the president's side on this, Lawrence.
The progressives here continue to talk about the numbers, and they celebrate them. The numbers were so high before that they celebrate some decreases. So this is what we're seeing. Murder is down by 49%. It's down by 49%, but we just had 8 people die over the weekend. Robbery is down 10%. Burglary is up 8%. Felony theft is up 46%, misdemeanor theft, 60%, motor vehicle theft, 78%. And many of them are juveniles. So they celebrate these numbers. But if there were 8 people that died over the weekend, what were the numbers before then?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. You know, look, Pritzker and Johnson should really follow the lead, the template of Muriel Bowser, the mayor of Washington, D.C., who is now cooperating because she saw the dramatic drop in crime in Washington, D.C. And in fact, she held a news conference and celebrated. She praised the infusion of law enforcement to help. And of course, the happiest people weren't just the innocent victims of crime, but law enforcement that desperately needed the help. Pritzker and Johnson should try to pay attention.
Yeah. I want to get your comments on another story when we talk about the lawfare as well as the courts. And this is the Federal Appeals Court that struck down President Trump's tariffs, arguing that it goes too far in its use of emergency powers. The question is, where is the Supreme Court going to fall on this? Because I can predict that it's going to make its way there, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Lawrence. The appellate court vacated the injunction, so that had stopped the Trump tariffs. So that gives him time to appeal to the Supreme Court. So the tariffs in the interim will continue until there is a decision sometime later next year. But most importantly, Trump does have a valid argument that he acted lawfully under the Economic Powers Act, because the staggering trade deficits, the foreign tariffs, were punishing our budget, our national debt, and that created an extraordinary threat to the economy. That is the exact language of the law that Congress passed back in '77, delegating powers to the president to regulate imports. And judicial review of presidential discretion in emergencies, according to the Supreme Court, is quite limited, particularly in foreign affairs. Regardless of all that, Lawrence, there are other laws that Trump can invoke to maintain his tariffs, the Trade Act, the Smoot-Hawley Act. So writing the obituary of Trump's new tariffs is a bit premature. I wouldn't hit the panic button quite yet on the demise of these tariffs.
You know, I just worry the president is not only using this from an economic standpoint, but to strike peace deals all across the world. He's using it as a defense mechanism as well. This is how Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, weighed in on this as well. This is what he had to say. Let's watch it.
We think we're going to win at the Supreme Court. And if you think about it, there are two parts here. There's the fentanyl tariffs, and what's a bigger emergency than 100,000, 200,000 Americans dying? And shouldn't the president be able to use IEPA, the Emergency Economic Powers Act, to stop the hundreds of thousands of Americans dying and the families that are being destroyed?
Greg, last word.
Yeah, he's 100% correct. Presidents have used in the past emergency powers to protect citizens and national security threats. I can't think of a greater threat than the hundreds of thousands who have lost their lives, particularly young people, because of the influx of fentanyl over the Mexican and Canadian borders. So the president was right to act on this.
Yeah. Greg Jared, always great on these topics. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Yesterday, there was a Labor Day protest in Chicago. We've talked a lot about the crime in Chicago. 56 were shot over the Labor Day weekend. 8 people died in Chicago as a result of those shootings. And this protest was called Workers Over Billionaires March. The mayor was there on stage, Brandon Johnson, and he was chanting "No federal troops in the city of Chicago." Listen.
No federal troops in the city of Chicago. No militarized force in the city of Chicago. We're going to defend our democracy in the city of Chicago. We're going to protect the humanity of every single person in the city of Chicago.
These leaders spend more time targeting the president of the United States than caring about the issues that matter to their community. Where's the protest for all the gang members that are running that city, ruining the livelihood as well as the future of all these children that have been shot in cold blood in Chicago? There's no protest for that. And by the way, they keep saying that it's a war. These National Guardsmen, they need to be in war zones. What is this? 54 people shot? 8 people killed. I mean, this is happening almost every other week in Chicago. I think it is a war zone there.
Well, and, comments like that have got to be offensive to the families and loved ones of the 8 individuals that died over the Labor Day weekend, the 8 that are now added to the previous 254 or 6 that have been killed this year. But you see a united front with the Democrats defending essentially the criminals by trying to resist federal assistance to bring it under control, because the governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, also getting on the same page as Mayor Johnson, attacking the Trump administration watch.
No one in the administration, the president or anybody under him, has called anyone in my administration and me, have not called the city of Chicago or anyone else. So it's clear that in secret they're planning this, well, it's an invasion with U.S. troops if they in fact do that.
It's not an invasion. It's the reason that Donald Trump has to get involved. It's because the leaders of these blue states can't keep crime off their streets. They can't do anything about it. They're not trying to do anything about it. The message we hear is we like the violence. We don't want Donald Trump to help us. They're so anti-Trump, Lawrence. You've been to Chicago how many times? Our friend Gianna Caldwell lost his brother, was shot, and they've never caught his killer. You have people in Chicago saying that the governor and the mayor, they have security.
Right.
Why not security for the rest of the residents?
Well, Ainsley, and to that point also, why would the administration call them when they've resisted every single move? For example, they tried to get the Chicago police, and by the way, the rank and file cops want to comply with this, but their city leadership doesn't want to comply. Give us the criminals that are in your city. If we put an ICE detainer on them, hand them over. They don't want to even honor that with people that are in custody for crimes that they've already committed on their citizens. So why would the president call them about the National Guard so they can give the criminals the information so they can dox more cops?
And, you know, when you look at what the crackdown success that's happened in Washington, we talked to a lot of residents in Washington that said they're all for that. You're seeing exactly the same thing with Chicago residents who are essentially begging for more help because they see the crime every day and they aren't protected. Listen here.
It's just gone from bad to worse to disaster.
No one really feels safe. It's impossible to feel safe in a city like this, especially with the leadership we have.
These kids are carrying guns like around the ages of 8 years old, and they're killing other 8-year-old kids with guns. It's insane.
My opinion, not enough police officers. The police officers' hands are tied.
So the police is really unappreciated for offhand under Brandon Johnson, Lori Lightfoot, J.B. Priester. Those are three are the reason why nobody want to be a police.
Their policies when it comes to crime is not working at all.
I think the biggest piece of the pie has to be more police officers, more protection. That's what the people want.
Why were all these resources okay when I covered the DNC at the National Convention for the Democrats? They had the National Guard there. They had federal law enforcement there. So when all the politicians and former presidents and they want to host a big party for a week, it's okay to bring the National Guard and all the feds in for that, but to protect them while they're there because they know it's not safe there. But when the people that live there on the day-to-day basis have to go through this, oh, okay. No, it's criminal. The president wants to elude democracy. Just not fair.
The policing works. I mean, Griff, you live in the D.C. area, and you've seen what's happened in your city. People were moving out to the suburbs because they were scared to live in downtown D.C. The policing works. The president brought in the National Guard.
Well, and people, you know, see this firsthand. I mean, look, you know, you can talk to pretty much any D.C. resident that's lived there for years, and they can speak to an experience. I got mugged at gunpoint years ago. My car got broken into 4 or 5 months ago. I didn't even call the police. Not much damage was done because, you know, that's the way life is. But the people in D.C. are responding the same way those residents in Chicago are responding because they realize, wow, Ainsley, I didn't ever think it didn't have to be this way. It could be safe with a temporary fix that includes National Guard presence. Pastor Corey Brooks out there, a strong voice in Chicago, is talking about this could certainly work in Chicago as it did in Washington. Listen.
Governor Pritzker said the National Guard should never come in unless there is an emergency. This is an emergency. Anytime we're continuing to lose lives on the south sides and west sides of Chicago, to those of us who live in the community, we deem that as an emergency. It's been a war zone for years, and for them to try to make people believe that Chicago is a safe place and that you can live in these parts of the neighborhood where we live and be okay, that's an outright lie. I do believe that organizations like Project Hood, we've done a great job, and other organizations like Metropolitan Family Services have done a great job getting the violence down. But having the National Guard come in would be like a shot in the arm. It would help us tremendously. We don't believe that they could solve all the problems, but we believe they could stand on corners and help calm down a lot of the violence so that we can continue to provide solutions that would be ongoing.
So the new line that I keep hearing from Democrats, and I even saw it on the Sunday shows over the weekend, is that we don't need law enforcement. We just need these programs. Right. I'm not against community programs. Pastor Brooks has a phenomenal program that we have supported, that our audience is given to get program for these kids. But you need both. You need law enforcement there. You can't send social workers to deal with the gangsters on the street. They're going to get shot. You need law and order, and you also need a pathway for these kids to have hopes in future. But the idea that you're just going to send all these programs in the community without any law and order is just asinine. So Democrats in Illinois refusing help from President Trump as he zeroes in on Chicago after a violent holiday weekend that left dozens hurt and at least 7 dead.
And Mike Tobin is live on the streets of Chicago this morning and joins us now with the latest. Mike.
Good morning, Ainsley. Good morning, guys. So far, the numbers we have show 54 people were shot, 7 fatally. It usually takes a few hours for Chicago police to release the official numbers from the holiday weekend. But you compare those numbers to the 4th of July weekend, in which 44 people were shot, 6 were killed. This is the dynamic that Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker says is not an emergency that warrants the intervention of federal troopers and the National Guard. In fact, Governor Pritzker launched over the weekend the conspiracy theory that Trump is using crime in Chicago to cheat the midterm elections.
Other aims are that he'd like to stop the elections in 2026 or, frankly, take control of those elections. He'll just claim that there's some problem with an election, and then he's got troops on the ground that can take control, if, in fact, he's allowed to do this.
Also over the weekend, Chicago's Mayor Brandon Johnson led groups chanting no federal troops in Chicago. And in a move critics dismiss as clearly political, Chicago's mayor signed an executive order banning law enforcement from wearing face masks. And he said that Chicago police will not play a supporting role to their federal counterparts.
We're going to defend our democracy in the city of Chicago. We're going to protect the humanity of every single person in the city of Chicago. No troops in Chicago. No troops in Chicago.
Now, Willie Wilson, a Chicago businessman and one-time mayoral candidate, says the mayor, the governor, and the Democrat Party have failed the people in Chicago who live with the violence.
I support President Trump on this one. There's a lot of things I do not agree with what he might have done or going to do. But on this one here, crime, I support him 1,000%.
And as we reported last week, Great Lakes Naval Base just north of Chicago is preparing to house some federal personnel, as the only real promise we have of federal intervention comes from DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, as she is promising a ramped-up immigration crackdown. Guys, back to you.
All right, Mike Tobin, live in the streets of Chicago. Mike, thank you.
So Democrat Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson delivering a defiant message to the White House after President Trump suggests he may deploy the National Guard to combat crime in the city.
No federal troops in the city of Chicago. No militarized force in the city of Chicago. We're going to defend our democracy in the city of Chicago. We're going to protect the humanity of every single person in the city of Chicago.
So joining me now is former White House Press Office Chief of Staff, Yemisi Egbawale. Yemisi, thanks so much for joining the program.
Thanks for having me, Lawrence.
So, look, I don't have any problems with the Democrats, objecting to the president sending the National Guard. Just offer a different plan. So you can't object to National Guard being there, federal law enforcement being there, and not hiring more cops in your city. What say you?
I think that the mayor of Chicago needs to find the sort of nuance that we've seen Muriel Bowser, to her credit, come around to. She has agreed that we definitely did need a surge of law enforcement in D.C. when it came to officer support, and she's also been able to be a little bit critical about the ICE deployment in the city. At the same time, Mayor Johnson can say we need to look at immigration humanely and how ICE operates, and we also need to make sure that Chicago residents, especially those in Black and brown communities, have a right to feel safe.
You're exactly right. I want to get this in because the president is weighing in on this morning. And you're right. There's people that look like me and you that are the people that are dying on the streets in Chicago. This is what he's saying now. At least 50 people were shot in Chicago over the weekend. 8 people were killed. The last 2 weekends were similar. Chicago is the worst of the most dangerous city in the world by far. Pritzker needs to help badly. He just doesn't know it yet. I will solve the crime problem fast, just like I did in D.C. Chicago will be safe again and soon. Make America great again. What's your reaction?
I think that it's interesting to watch Pritzker and Mayor Johnson work together. Mayor Muriel Bowser we don't have a governor here in D.C., and so we didn't have to work with anybody kind of in the state ahead of them. Mayor Johnson has been really, really forthright and pretty blatant when it comes to criticism of this rollout. I think that it's been interesting to watch Pritzker, who's been a little bit more nuanced. I hope he's able to get there a bit more, but at the end of the day, people in Chicago care about crime, and Democrats are underwater when it comes to law enforcement and law and order.
So true. I want to get you to weigh in on this other topic, and that's Rashida Tlaib. She had this to say at a conference. She called America genocide enablers. Let's watch it.
They thought they could kill us, rape us, imprison us, violently uproot us from our olive tree farms, starve our children to death, and we would disappear. Well, guess what? Now we're in Congress, and we're every corner of the United States. They just don't get it. They will never truly comprehend, even after 7 decades, that we aren't going anywhere. We are just getting started. I want to say to all of them, every genocide enabler, look at this room. We ain't going anywhere.
You know, Yemisi, that may fly in her district, and that may fly in Zohran Mamdani's race here in New York City. But is that the national message that represents your party?
Let me be clear here. Rashida Tlaib does not sound like a sitting member of Congress. She sounds like an activist who has no responsibility to the people who elected her. She was elected in 2018, and she sits in a seat that John Conyers vacated, who still holds the record as the longest-serving Black member of Congress. The people that elected her didn't elect her on the Gaza and Palestinian issue. I understand that that's her identity, and she's made inroads as being the first Palestinian American elected to Congress, but you don't get to run on your ideology. You have to run on what constituents voted you for. And I believe that the people in her district care about economic opportunity, infrastructure, having crime down, safety in their communities. I mean, at some point, this has to run out. And so I think she has to stop caring about what people online say and care more about what happens in her district.
Such a good point. The things that actually matter to the people in her district as well on the day-to-day basis. Yemisi, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Always a pleasure.
No federal troops in the city of Chicago. No militarized force in the city of Chicago. We're going to defend our democracy in the city of Chicago. Are you prepared to defend this land? If this president decides to continue to break this Constitution, it's going to be the labor movement that stitches it back together.
Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson rallying against President Trump's offer to deploy federal troops to help the city fight crime. Now, this despite a violent holiday weekend. At least 7 people were shot and killed and dozens more wounded. Kata Truss lives in Chicago. She is the director of the Community Roundtable and joins us now. Great to have you back on the show. I want to read to you what's in Mayor Johnson's executive order. He says the city will pursue all available legal and legislative avenues to counter coordinated efforts from the federal government that violate the rights of the city and its residents. You're closer to the people than we are, and we'd love to hear what you think about all of this that's going on, and especially the very tragic news from over the weekend.
Well, first of all, this has been a very violent weekend in the city of Chicago. As a matter of fact, the last several weekends in Chicago have been very violent. And so when Mayor Johnson stands there and talks about taking over the city and not letting troops come in, is as opposed to what? As opposed to the high crime that is here, as opposed to the murders and the violence that's going on, as opposed to businesses being afraid to open their doors because they're constantly being robbed. What's the point in this? You know, the fact of the matter is this. Mayor Johnson has a dismal approval rating. And so going against President Trump probably in his mind seems like the right thing to do. He has never listened to the people and what we really want since he's been in office. And, you know, what is really happening here is I feel that the mayor is probably deflecting. He's deflecting from the fact that he mismanaged the city's money by supporting the migrant crisis. and he asked the Board of Education to take out a junk loan for the city to cover costs. That's basically what the loan is for. So now that the Board of Education has refused, most of the measures that he's really tried to push in this city have been turned down because they've been things that have not been beneficial to the people here. So of course he's going to go against whatever measures President Trump puts in place.
Right, so he would use politics and a fight with Trump in order to help his own standing, is what I hear you say. I want you to listen to some of these Chicago business owners to talk about what they're going through.
The city's not safe, you know, for the mayor and the governor to go on TV and use us as statics, as numbers. I mean, we're human beings. We're talking about real time. We have to hire extra security, private security on the street. We have to make sure that we advise all our patrons when they go home and check the Uber. People can't even walk their dogs. I mean, this is to believe that the city is safe the way they made it sound in the press conference. It is wrong.
Kata, if Brandon Johnson were to change his mind today and take President Trump up on the offer, get some results like they're seeing in Washington, D.C., do you think that his approval would actually be harmed in the city?
Absolutely not. It may help him, considering the fact that his approval rating is at a dismal 1 digit. It might be something that can help him. But the fact of the matter is, it really doesn't matter about what Brandon Johnson says. It doesn't matter about his politics. What matters is the people. And the people here in Chicago don't feel safe. The people here in Chicago want the help that President Trump is trying to send here. So regardless of what the mayor says, we want the help.
Kata, thank you for being here. I think that there could be, perhaps news about this in the next week or so, maybe sooner. And we'd love to have you back. You're a great guest for us to have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's bring in now Republican State Representative Tony McCombie, Minority Leader of the Illinois State House. Welcome to the program. Good to see you. Hope you had a good and safe holiday weekend. I want to play quickly some sound from Chicago residents about what they think is going on in that city. Listen here.
Always coordinated and cooperative.
From bad to worse. It's just getting worse and worse every day.
No one really feels safe. It's impossible to feel safe in a city like this, especially with the leadership we have.
Like, these kids are carrying guns like around the ages of 8 years old, and they're killing other 8-year-old kids with guns. It's insane.
I think the biggest piece of the pie has to be more police officers, more protection. That's what the people want.
So I know that there's this debate about what the National Guard could do in Chicago if the president were to send them there. But I would think that any amount of new bodies that would enter a city like Chicago would be welcomed by local police there, because then they could actually go and do their job in the hardest hit areas, the hardest hit neighborhoods in that city. Don't you think that that's what would happen?
Oh, absolutely. And to continue to put criminals over victims, as you just heard from the folks previous to me, I mean, it is absolutely, they're making it a partisan issue, and keeping people safe should be. Our law enforcement in Chicago is physically and mentally exhausted, and they need additional help.
So I want to actually pull up this new poll out there. It's an AP poll, because you mentioned that this has become a partisan issue, and it hasn't been working out for Democrats. This is an AP headline: Democrats see crime as a major problem. Their party is struggling to address it. And then the poll here, it's fascinating, because 81% of people say that large city crime is a major problem. And then 53% approve of Trump's crime handling. And then 55%, so over half, believe that military or National Guard assistance is acceptable. I remember when New York Governor Kathy Hochul sent in the National Guard to patrol the subways when crime was on the rise on subways, to reassure New York City residents, and that was fine for Democrats then. Nobody complained about it then, but it's not okay when the president does it. And that's actually what a Chicago Democrat, Alderman Raymond Lopez, is making the point here. That's what's happening here. That this is really just partisan politics. Listen here.
The fact of the matter is that we've always coordinated and cooperated with the federal government and our federal agencies to bring public safety to the streets. We work with the FBI, the ATF, the DEA, and all of a sudden now we don't want to work with them. There's a serious disconnect in what's going on here on the ground. But overwhelmingly, anything that helps bring peace, as we've saw, bring increased public safety in Washington, D.C. over the past 30 days. They want that here as well.
What do you think of that?
I think it's incredible. I remember just very recently, our Governor Pritzker, called in the National Guard for the DNC convention. Illinois continues to double down on 80-20 issues, safety being one of them, by enacting a zero cash bail in 2023 and continuing on with the sanctuary state, which does hurt our federal funding. Enough's enough.
And I feel like the results prove that it's working, right? I mean, everyone's watching in real time. We're seeing what's happening in the nation's capital, and even the mayor here, who wasn't so happy about the National Guard coming in the very beginning, has now done a 180 and is really calling it a success. Why wouldn't it work in a place like Chicago?
It absolutely would work, and we should be helping our law enforcement in Chicago, and this is the help that they need. They're taking away from their times from their families. They're putting themselves in harm's way. They're exhausted, and they need help, rather than trying to rework the crime numbers so they could have a decrease in their budget, which I think ultimately is the Mayor Johnson's plan.
Do you think that the president should withhold federal police funding from a city like Chicago? I know he's threatened it in the past.
I think Governor Pritzker should end our sanctuary state, and we wouldn't be having that concern.
Okay. Leader McCombie, thank you for joining us on the program. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, right now,
let's bring in Janine Pirro now. She's the U.S. Attorney for D.C. Janine, it is great to have you on the program, and welcome back. Good to see you.
Thank you.
All right, so you, rightly so, have been given a lot of credit for this crime crackdown in Washington, D.C., but that is not stopping, and the numbers prove it, I should say, that's not stopping Democrats like Jamie Raskin, the Maryland Democrat, railing against President Trump's National Guard response in our capital city. Listen.
So we're saying, one, there's no emergency. Second, even if there'd been an emergency, there's no power that the president has within the statute to take over the police department. This is a bunch of performative political actions that are designed for completely PR purposes.
He says it's all performative. To him, you say what?
I say, number one, he doesn't understand the law, which is amazing given that the guy is actually in Congress writing laws. And I say, number two, since when does crime become a partisan issue? And who is it who is entitled to say crime is low enough and let's not bother? Who among us is willing to say, I'm willing to have my child shot tonight in Chicago or next weekend, when there were 54 people shot, 8 of them killed in Chicago, and you've got these Democrats running around and saying, well, crime is down, we don't have to worry about it. That's absurd. And these people are not doing their job. Their job is to protect the law-abiding citizens in this country. And the idea that sending the National Guard around is not sustainable because it costs too much, that's pretty incredible coming from Democrats, who, by the way, is willing to put a cost on the life of a child who was killed by a bullet. In the last year and a half in Washington, D.C., where I am now, I've got 45 African-American teens, one of them a 3-year-old and one a 5-year-old, in addition to the teens, all killed with gunfire. Nobody cares about them. Nobody talks about them. The clearance rate is 29%. What does that mean? That means that 70% of the criminals who shot them with guns are out there. The murderers are out there with their guns. So anytime a Democrat wants to say it costs too much money, crime is low enough, the president doesn't have the power, is wrong. President Trump is taking this city and turning it into the city on the hill. Right now, it's upside down because we are the 4th largest homicide, had the 4th highest homicide rate in the nation 2 years ago, actually in 2024. So let's stop all this namby-pambying. And this guy, Pritzker, he should be ashamed of himself to say that 54 shootings that's not enough to bring in extra law enforcement. That is simply a denial of your obligation. It is a rejection of your oath to protect the people.
Speaking of the governor of Illinois, here is Governor Pritzker, in his own words, firmly against the idea of troops in his city. Listen.
I'm saying we don't want troops on the streets of American cities. Right. That's un-American. And frankly, the president of the United States ought to know better. This one doesn't seem to.
But for some reason, he was okay with this back in August 2024. Remember this? The Illinois National Guard deployed to assist Chicago police for the DNC, Janine. Governor J.B. Pritzker confirmed Sunday that about 250 members of the Guard have been called up to be on standby during the convention. We have 13,000 National Guard in the state of Illinois. Very proud of those National Guardsmen, and we do call them up when we really need them. So it was okay then, but not now?
Yeah, you know, the irony is so rich here, Sandra. The truth is that these people are about ideology and power. They should sit with the families of homicide victims. They should talk to the mothers who don't know if their sons are coming home tonight because of the gunfire that is pervasive. It is predictable. Only President Trump cares about these people. Only President Trump is the one who's willing to put the resources, the energy, and yes, he has the determination to make this work. And it is working. I'll tell you, last night, my prosecutors told me that it was the first time they didn't have a felon in possession. What does that tell you? That tells you that we are zeroing in on the biggest people or the biggest criminals who are responsible for crime. They're either in jail right now or they're afraid to come out because they know that we're going to be arresting them. Yeah. So this is effective, and the people of D.C. know it. And this nonsense about National Guard on the street, next thing they're going to say police shouldn't be on the street. No surprise, because the three dumbest words ever said by Democrats were defund the police. So you know where they're coming from.
Amen to that. So we do know that we just got word that the governor of Illinois, Pritzker, and the mayor of the city, Brandon Johnson, are going to be holding a presser at 4 p.m. Eastern time. You can only imagine where they're going to go next with all of this. I can't imagine it's going to be a plea for the Guard to come in, but we'll see. That being said, this is one of the videos that Governor Pritzker put out there. I mean, it blew my mind. As you know, I'm born and raised in Chicago, and I know this lakefront well. He's making the case in this post with this video. He did this just at the end of August, that things are great here. Here's the beautiful lakefront. Not listening to what the residents who have to live in that city every day are saying, like Osiris King, Janine. This is a Chicago resident talking to Fox Digital today on his experience living in crime-ridden Chicago. Listen.
South Side, I mean, it's been rough. So you see a lot of crazy stuff. I mean, I remember being in a Family Dollar store that got robbed. You know, they kick in the door, they say, everybody get down, people are screaming. And I was only 12 years old, you know? And this kind of stuff, it happens all the time. But a lot of people who don't live in these areas, they don't get to see it.
I mean, to Molly Hemingway's point last hour, Janine, aren't Democrats, and if I'll ask you to put your political hat on here, aren't Democrats just playing right into Republicans' hands by saying, no, you're not feeling and living through this crime crisis that is actually happening in the Windy City? I'll get a final thought from you.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about the fact that the American people are cognizant of what the president is trying to do and what Republicans are trying to do in this situation. You know, the fact that, you know, you show these beautiful areas of Chicago, and I lived in Chicago for several years, and, you know, you're ignoring what's going on the south side of Chicago. President Trump in D.C. is putting the troops and making sure that all our federal partners, along with the Metropolitan Police in D.C., are going into the crime-ridden areas, are going into the locations where crime is beyond control. And so therein lies the difference. If Pritzker wants to show a nice side of Chicago, and President Trump is willing to go into the crime zone and face the beast and make the arrest and take the criticism, you know what? I'm with the president, and so are the American people.
Always appreciate you. Janine Pirro, good to have you back on the program.
Thanks.
We miss you. Come back soon.
I miss you too.
All right. Good stuff. Doing good work. All right.
Have you decided you're definitely going to send National Guard troops to Chicago?
I didn't say when, but the answer is, look, Chicago's very interesting because I watched Pritzker get up and say about, we don't need help, we're safe. But 2 weeks ago, they had 6 people murdered, and they had 24 people hit by bullets. Last week, as you know, it was 7 people, 24 people hit, and 7 people died. And then over the last 2 days, that was the crown jewel. They had, I guess, 9 or 10 killed, and 50 hit with bullets. And you have this governor get up, who's a terrible governor. Probably he and Gavin Newsom would be probably the 2 worst and most naive. They're naive. either they're naive or they're very untruthful. And he'll say, we don't want any protection. We don't need. So in the last 3 weeks, he's lost almost 20 people killed. There's no place in the world, including you can go to Afghanistan, you can go to places that you would think of. They don't even come close to this. Chicago is a hellhole right now. Baltimore is a hellhole right now. Parts of Los Angeles are terrible. If we didn't put out the fires, and I mean the other fires, the bullet fires, they didn't do a good job with, they should have had the water coming down, like I said. You know, we had to release the water. We had to go in and release the water to LA. It's so badly run. But if I didn't send the National Guard into Los Angeles, I would be making an announcement today. I'd be talking about Huntsville, and I'd simultaneously be saying, by the way, the Olympics is not coming to Los Angeles. If we didn't do that, and even the sheriff, the top law enforcement person in Los Angeles said, we could not have handled it without them. So that's what he said.
Make your mind up on Chicago, though?
Well, we're going in. I didn't say when. We're going in. When you lose, look, I have an obligation. This isn't a political thing. I have an obligation. When we lose, when 20 people are killed over the last 2.5 weeks, and 75 are shot with bullets. So let me tell you a little story about a place called D.C., District of Columbia, right here where we are. It's now a safe zone. We have no crime. It's in such great shape. You can go and actually walk with your children, your wife, your husband. You can walk right down the middle of the street. You're not going to be shot, Peter. You're safe. Everyone likes you anyway. They probably wouldn't do it. But it's so dangerous. And there are people in this audience that you've suffered greatly. There are people in this audience that have been mugged and hurt badly, and they don't want to talk about it. Maybe you were very brave in talking about it. You made quite an impression on a lot of people. I appreciate it. But there were other people in this room that have been hurt very badly just walking down the street in D.C. Washington, D.C. is a safe zone right now. It's a safe city. The restaurants are open. They're booming. You can't get a restaurant. New restaurants are announcing that they're going to be open. This took place in 12 days. Now it's 15 days, but 3 days ago it became what's known as a safe zone. It's a safe city. And this city was really bad, really, really bad. We took 1,600 people out, hardcore criminals that will not be coming back anytime soon. And we're very proud of it. You know, to have our nation's capital lose every week, you know, it was like years, many years where every single week somebody was killed for many, many, many consecutive weeks. This went on for years. And then we had, last week it was announced that nobody was killed last week. And I made that announcement in front of a very distinguished leader of a country. And I'm saying proudly, ladies and gentlemen, nobody was killed in Washington, D.C. this week. He looked at me like, what's that all about? I say, yeah, we have a little bit of a crime problem. And we don't have a crime problem in Washington anymore. And the mayor has been very helpful, and the police commission has been very helpful, and it's been a great team. And I would love to have Governor Pritzker call me. I'd gain respect for him and say, we do have a problem, and we'd love you to send in the troops, because you know what? The people, they have to be protected. I saw today on one of your networks, not a friendly network, except really the opposite, I would say, very unfriendly network. And they interviewed about 12 people on this morning. Most of them were African American, who were black. And they were saying, please, please, please let the president send in. These were people from Chicago. Please, we need help. We need help. We can't walk outside. We're petrified. If the governor of Illinois would call me up, I would love to do it. Now, we're going to do it anyway. We have the right to do it because I have an obligation to protect this country. And that includes Baltimore. I saw where Governor Moore was asking me to take a walk down the street of Baltimore. Well, Baltimore is a very unsafe place. It's rated number 4 in the city, one of the most unsafe places anywhere in the world. But, you know, we took care. This was a beautiful thing that happened in Washington because we showed that it could be done. And this wasn't just sending big, strong guys, and they are big and they are strong. You know, we had a great decision from the Supreme Court that had to do with sort of talent. It had to do with you are put down based on merit. You can hire based on merit. So merit for a soldier or for a policeman is strong, physically fit, something, you know, having a certain ability, not a person that is woke and got the job through woke, but wasn't strong enough to lift a gun out of the holster, et cetera, et cetera. No, I looked at the police. As you know, last week I went over, we had a meeting with, there had to be 300 people, and they were all very impressive looking. And when the bad guys see them, they're not going to do a thing. And so I'm very proud of Washington. It serves as a template, and we're going to do it elsewhere. But Chicago is certainly going to be high. I would love to have him call. I would love the governor of Illinois. I'd be honored to take his call. All he has to do is say, sir, we need help. It's out of control. And everyone knows it is. He's not kidding anyone. I would love to have, I would say, Governor Moore call, because I watched him over the weekend trying to explain that Baltimore, what they need is housing. No, they don't need housing. They need to get rid of the criminals. These are hardcore criminals. You know, we took many people off the streets of Washington, D.C. They're hardcore. They're not going to be good. In 10 years, in 20 years, in 2 years, they're going to be criminals. They were born to be criminals, frankly. They were born to be criminals, and they're tough and mean, and they'll cut your throat, and they won't even think about it the next day. They won't even remember that they did it. And we're not going to have those people. Washington, D.C. is now a safe zone. It's a safe place. And you can walk, Katie, you can walk right down the street with, by the way, one of the biggest human beings I've ever seen, which is her husband. He was a football player for like 11 years in the NFL. He's a big person. But big doesn't mean anything when they have guns and when they have knives and everything else that they have, right? But you can walk right down the street, even by yourself, and you're totally safe. Washington, D.C. is a great thing. Yes, ma'am, please.
Calling on Democratic leaders across the country to work with you on crime. Do you see your efforts here in D.C., including, for example, working with Mayor Bowser here as a model for bringing more bipartisanship in matters not only with crime, but also issues that matter to everyday American people's lives?
So Mayor Bowser's been great. She could have taken the thing, oh, well, and then after I clean it up, they'll take credit for it. You know what they do is they take credit. Like, we cleaned up Los Angeles. We did a great job there. And it was overwhelming what was going on. And again, the police chief made a statement that we could not have done, there's no way they could handle it. You saw what was happening out there. It was going to be a disaster. We stopped it cold. If we didn't do that, would have been a very sad day. And you know, remember, we have the Olympics, we have the World Cup, we have all these things coming, and we have 250, all of these things coming. But I watched Newsom get up and say he's doing a great, he's not, we're the ones that did it, and that's okay, whatever it takes. But the main thing is but he got up and said, we did it. Well, he didn't want us there, and he's going to need us again because it's starting to form again. I see it. It's starting to form again. You know, we have to maintain. It's like maintenance on an airplane. You can buy it, but you have to maintain it. And if you don't maintain it, a good plane becomes very unsafe very quickly. So it's an honor to do it. It's a lot of presidents wouldn't do what I'm doing. I don't need this heat. But when I watched television last night and I'm watching the news and I see that 9 people were killed in Chicago and 54 were badly wounded with bullets, I say, that's not this country. We have to do something. And I do say this, I say this very much. I'm not speaking to anybody but them right now. I would love to receive calls from governors and mayors saying they need help. We'll help them. We have a lot of people. We have a great force. We have a great military force. You know, Pete will tell you that when I was running for office, and this was a big headline, I think, you know, probably got me a couple of votes, but you couldn't sign people in the military. Nobody wanted to join the military, the Army, Air Force, the Navy, Marines, Space Force, Coast Guard. We never forget Coast Guard because they've done such a great job. Never. But nobody wanted to join any of them. We were way below what we wanted. Every single one. The closest was the Marines, whatever that is. You'll explain that to me. But the closest was the Marines. But every service was way down, way down. And then I got elected, and our country's the hottest country anywhere in the world right now.
So the Democrats are choosing resistance over safety after another deadly weekend of gun violence in Chicago. At least 8 people shot and killed. 58 others were injured. Despite the carnage, Democratic leaders in Illinois say they do not want President Trump to send in the troops for a D.C.-style takeover. However, the president says he's ready to go in.
Chicago is a hellhole right now.
Mind up on Chicago, though?
Well, we're going in. I didn't say when. We're going in. I would love to have Governor Pritzker call me. I'd gain respect for him and say, we do have a problem, and we'd love you to send in the troops.
But Chicago's leaders, they are defiant.
I'm aware that the President of the United States likes to go on television and beg me to call and ask him for troops. I find this extraordinarily strange, as Chicago does not want troops on our streets. I refuse to play a reality game show with Donald Trump again.
We do not want or need military occupation in our city. We do not want or need militarized immigration enforcement in our city.
Even Trump's harshest critic, Joe Scarborough, urged Governor Pritzker to team up with Trump on deploying the National Guard to Chicago.
I actually think that J.B. Pritzker should do something radical. I think he should pick up the phone, call the president, let's partner up. These are the most dangerous parts of my state. We would love to figure out how to have a partnership, because right now, just hey, nothing to see here moving along. No problem here. Hey, Donald Trump, we don't need you. And, the mayor talking about we're going to protect people's dignity in our city. We'll protect their lives.
Jesse, I was thinking about how many years we've worked together and how many Mondays or the day after a holiday we come back, and this is a story, and this one was a big one over the weekend, 58 injured and 7 killed.
Yeah, it's a lot of blood. The Democrats keep on saying, well, the homicides are down. They keep saying, they went from 900 killed to 600 killed a year. That's like when your girlfriend says, well, the last guy I was with, I cheated on him 9 times. I've only cheated on you 6 times.
Well, that's better.
It doesn't make you feel better. It's still a lot of dead bodies. Now, he called in the Guard for the DNC over the summer. Remember, Dana? We were there. It was safe. It was secure. They had the Guard there, but they won't call the Guard in for the South Side. That's racist. The South Side's huge. It's very hard to handle. I think it's 234 square miles. It's bigger than Boston, San Francisco, and D.C. So it's kind of like a densely populated flat area with row homes that's very, very hard to police. You would know better than anybody. And there's certain neighborhoods on the South Side where it's more dangerous there than in Iraq. So why not use the surge? It worked in Iraq, and it should work in Chicago. You put a lot of boots on the ground, and it frees up locals to do the dirty work and go in and get the trigger pullers. It's worked in D.C. It should be able to work here. It's the heroin highway, they call it, because all the drugs come from Mexico through the highways right up to the hub in Chicago, because it's a great distribution point. You get O'Hare, you get the lakes, you put them out on the boats, you got rail going everywhere, you got highways going, different arteries throughout the country, and you distribute it. So the cartels give the drugs to the black gangs, they distribute it, and they're the ones killing each other. It's black victims. 90% of the victims of these homicides are black. So people are asking questions. Are Chicago politicians getting payoffs by cartels to look the other way on the South Side? Because you can't explain the tolerance of death this way. Also, on the demand side, we have to stop doing so many drugs, okay? I know cocaine is fun. People tell me in maybe college, in your 20s, after your 20s, it should stop. And you should never be doing heroin, ever. Meth is ridiculous. You're up for 28 straight days and you turn into a shrimp. Now, if we don't stop that, then we're going to still have this problem. So both sides, the traffickers and the buyers are a lot of white people. They have to stop buying it as well. And this guy that says, I think it was, blacks and the indigenous built Chicago. No, they didn't. They did not. The English established it. It was just an Indian fur trading village on the side of a lake. And immigrants from Europe, the Poles, the Czechs, the Germans, the Irish, Italians, they created Chicago. All right? So let's give credit where credit is due.
Thank you, Jesse.
You're welcome.
Paul Morrow.
Sir.
So Jesse mentioned that you would know better than anyone, and I'm curious what you think the police officers think, and maybe they can't speak out because they work for the mayor and then the governor, and those two elected individuals are speaking so loudly, but as a cop, are they demoralized?
Of course they're demoralized because they're way down in headcount and they're being asked to do more with less. They're going to take any help that they can get, but let's tease a couple things out. Prophylactic policing, stopping stuff before it happens, is always better. The best crime-fighting strategy is to fight crime before it happens, and that's particularly true when the system is gamed against you because of the Safety Act, which mirrors the criminal justice reforms that we have here in New York, and you have a revolving door. So, okay, you can get 10,000 more cops, 20,000 more cops. You put them in, they're going to make more arrests, fair enough, but the same perps are going to come right out. That's why potentially putting out a more of an omnipresence of, like the National Guard, stopping stuff before it happens, because when people see an armed guy there in fatigues, they're going to behave. The problem here, and we just have to put my lawyer hat on, this is going to be a tough lift for Donald Trump to do. This is not D.C. The aperture, you know, if you notice, Pritzker and Johnson both keep saying the same thing, which is there's no emergency. There's no emergency. Because the emergency clauses, that's the aperture that Donald Trump has to put them out, to federalize the National Guard. And so they're already putting out what their legal argument is going to be. But undeniably, if you just look at people voting with their feet, you have Boeing, Caterpillar, Citadel, Tyson Foods, New York Stock Exchange, Peak Six Investments, all of these firms have picked up and left Chicago. And then Brandon Johnson says, financially, Chicago is hitting a point of no return. Well, of course, because the tax base is decamping for redder pastures. Right. And in the public safety and the political arena, the inability not to tie the safety piece to that is the equivalent of not being able to add 2 and 2. And so somebody has to do something here. Realistically, it should be Pritzker. I don't think they're going to do it.
So, Jessica, when a Democrat like Governor Pritzker loses Morning Joe, things might have gone a bit too far.
Well, I was watching Mika's face the whole time, and she clearly was not in agreement with her husband about what the approach should be. And, you know, since Joe and Mika made the pilgrimage to Mar-a-Lago, they've been a little bit different than they were beforehand. But the country is different than it was during Trump 1.0. And obviously, he managed to get a lot of votes and support from people who weren't necessarily very big fans of his the first time around. So I'm not that surprised to hear that from Joe Scarborough. I think Paul is correct about the lift that this would take. We saw Judge Breyer's opinion today about what happened in Los Angeles, that Donald Trump had the right to deploy the Guard, but they couldn't do anything. That essentially they shouldn't be enforcing any laws. They can't engage in security patrols, traffic control, crowd control, or riot control. And fundamentally, that's because they hadn't proven that there was an emergency, which is why, as Paul said, they keep using
California,
that word.
He's on firmer ground because it's related to immigration.
He still got knocked down
so,
today.
And
They
Breyer's
said there
already been
were
overturned once.
Okay. So we'll see. But I'm just
on appeal.
all right, sure. And, you know, on a day when you get Eileen Cannon, you can talk about her.
No,
but
I mean
today
the Supreme Court.
What?
They'll rule in Trump's favor in the Supreme Court, but I'm not a lawyer.
That's true. Handpicked. No, you're not. You're just a historian.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. So we'll see where it goes.
Okay.
I think.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were.
No. Am I done?
Well, we got Tyrus.
I've been close to get Tyrus in. Maybe I'll come back.
Tyrus, Pritzker says he's not going to call Trump.
No, because Black lives don't matter. That's what it basically comes down. That's what we're learning. Black lives don't matter. Listen, I get, and Jesse makes a great point where he's like, what is the end game? Who is benefiting? Why would you not want this help? You've lost your cities. Your police department is depleted. You defunded it. You did a good job of defunding it. You also forced a lot of early retirements, and you encouraged an entire generation, loot first, ask questions later. The South is dangerous. You had, 57 people caught shrapnel this weekend? Yeah. 7 died. Is your reelection that important? Like, sometimes leadership means you have to make tough decisions for the better overall good. It's not a Democrat thing. It's not a Republican thing. It's like, as a man, as a black man, since they always love to tell you what color they are whenever they make a speech, and it's black men and young boys that are getting shot up and innocent victims and all these things are happening in your community, and you care more about it because it might come from President Trump? Here's the craziest thing. Clean up your streets, get the help, and then you can take credit for it or not take credit for it, or maybe you won't be elected anymore, but maybe one day, Mr. Mayor, you'll be walking down somewhere and some kid will come up to you and say, when I was a kid, you changed my life, you saved my life. Because the soldiers coming in and the police coming in made my grandmother not afraid to go outside anymore, sir. Like, some things are more important than politics. I don't care what Democrat or Republican puts that feather in their cap, but a city like Chicago should not be like Afghanistan, not in this country. It's shameful and it's embarrassing.
I remembered what my point was, and it was from your interview last week with Mike Johnson, where you asked him about, well, why aren't we sending the National Guard into Louisiana, where he's from, or Alabama, Mississippi, Oklahoma, Republican-controlled states that have higher murder rates, violent crime, et cetera. And that is the point here. Donald Trump doesn't talk about any of those issues in Republican states because he knows that he controls them.
Because it's a big city.
No.
Also, the senator of Louisiana said, bring them in.
Well,
I think every city, I don't care if it's blue, red, if you have a weekend with that many people dying, everyone should come in. I'm not Mike Johnson, I'm Tyrus.
I know
I'm saying
exactly
that I
who you
wouldn't give
are,
a damn about my political career.
But you don't have as much power as Mike Johnson, and he's not saying to Donald Trump, we need that assistance.
Okay, well, obviously this story is not over, or is this issue, but hopefully the people of Chicago can have some peace in the future.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.